For 12 years, Michael believed there was only one thing missing from his perfect life: a son. He had a successful construction business, a beautiful home, a loving wife named Grace, and three bright, cheerful daughters who adored him. Emma, the oldest, loved reading books and dreamed of becoming a doctor. Sophia, the middle child, was always asking questions about how everything worked. Little Lily filled the house with laughter. She followed her father everywhere, convinced he was the strongest man in the world. Every evening, the girls rushed to the gate the moment they heard Michael's car pull into the driveway. "Daddy's home!" they shouted, racing into his arms. To the girls, he was their hero. But inside Michael's heart was a disappointment he never tried to hide. Whenever relatives visited, someone always made the same remark. "Three girls already?" His uncle laughed one afternoon. "Michael, when are you going to give this family a son?" Another relative shook his head. "A man without a son is like a tree without roots." Michael forced a smile, but those words settled deep inside him. Even his own mother constantly reminded him. One Sunday after church, she pulled him aside. "My son," she whispered, "you've done well in life, but who will carry your family name after you're gone? Your daughters will marry and take another man's name." Michael nodded silently. Grace overheard the conversation. Later that evening, while preparing dinner, she gently said, "Michael, our daughters are healthy, respectful, and full of love. Isn't that enough?" He sighed heavily. "I love them," he answered, "but every man dreams of having a son." Grace stopped stirring the soup. "The baby's gender isn't something I choose." "I know," Michael replied, "but I can't stop hoping." Months later, Grace discovered she was pregnant again. When she shared the news, the three little girls jumped around the living room in excitement. "We're getting another baby," Lily squealed. Emma smiled. "I hope it's another sister." Sophia laughed. "I don't care if it's a boy or a girl. I just want someone to play with." Michael smiled politely, but in his heart, he believed this pregnancy was different. "This is my son," he told himself. From that day forward, he began buying blue baby clothes. He purchased a tiny football, a miniature suit, little sneakers. He even painted one room light blue. Grace watched quietly. "Michael," she said gently one afternoon, "maybe we shouldn't decorate everything for a boy." He laughed confidently. "I've prayed enough. This time God has answered me." As Grace's pregnancy progressed, Michael became more certain. He stopped looking at baby girl clothes completely. Whenever people asked about the pregnancy, he proudly answered, "My son is on the way." One evening during dinner, Emma looked at him. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart." "What if the baby is another girl?" The dining room became silent. Michael slowly put down his spoon. "It won't be." Emma looked confused. "But what if it is?" Michael forced a smile. "It won't happen." Grace noticed the sadness in her daughters' faces. After dinner, she gathered the girls into her bedroom. "Listen to me," she said softly. "No matter whether this baby is a boy or a girl, every child is a blessing." Emma nodded. Sophia smiled. Little Lily hugged her mother's growing belly. "I hope the baby likes me." Grace laughed through tears. "Oh, sweetheart, your little brother or little sister will love you very much." Weeks passed. The due date finally arrived. Before sunrise, Grace woke Michael. "I think it's time." Within minutes, they were driving to the hospital. The three girls stood at the front door waving. "Bring our baby home," they shouted happily. Michael squeezed Grace's hand as they entered the maternity ward. He whispered under his breath, "Lord, please, just this once, give me a son." He had no idea that before the day was over, one decision would change the course of his life forever.
A son. Please let it be a son.
Congratulations, you have a healthy baby girl.
A girl?
Yes, mother and baby are doing very well.
I can't wait to meet the baby. I want to hold the baby first. No, I do. But I'm the oldest. Let's take turns. Okay, let's pick more clothes.
He's not coming back. He switched off his phone and disappeared for 2 days. Instead of celebrating our daughter, he just left.
When Grace finally returned home 2 days later with a newborn in her arms, It wasn't Michael driving the car. It was her older brother, David. The girls rushed outside. "Mommy!" They carefully surrounded the tiny baby. "She's so beautiful. Can I hold her? Look how tiny her fingers are." The house filled with laughter, but one person was missing. "Daddy isn't here?" Lily asked quietly. Grace forced a smile. "He had something important to do." Late that evening, the front door finally opened. Michael walked inside carrying an overnight bag. The girls rushed toward him. "Daddy! Daddy! Come and see the baby!" Without answering, he walked straight past them. Grace stood beside the crib. "Michael." He looked at the sleeping newborn for less than 2 seconds. Then he turned away. "I'm tired." That night, for the first time in their marriage, Grace cried herself to sleep while holding her newborn daughter. She didn't realize that this was only the beginning of the heartbreak that awaited her. Grace hoped Michael would change. She told herself that perhaps he only needed time to accept the disappointment. Every morning, she placed the baby in her father's arms while he sat eating breakfast. Without even looking at the child, Michael gently placed the baby back into the crib. "I have to get to work," he said. One morning, little Lily noticed something. "Daddy," Michael looked up from his coffee. "Yes? Why don't you ever carry our baby sister?" The room fell silent. Grace held her breath. Michael avoided his daughter's eyes. "I'm busy," Lily frowned, "but you used to carry me every day." Michael stood up without answering. The front door closed behind him. Lily looked at her mother. "Did Daddy stop loving babies?" Grace forced a smile, though her heart was breaking. "No, sweetheart. He just has a lot on his mind." The baby still had no name. 3 weeks had passed since her birth. Friends and relatives began asking, "What are you calling her?" Grace looked hopefully at Michael. "You should choose her name." He shrugged. "It doesn't matter." Grace stared at him in disbelief. "It doesn't matter? It's only another girl." Those 4 words pierced her heart. That evening, Grace sat beside the baby's crib. She gently stroked the little girl's cheek. "I'll name you Hope," she whispered, "because one day I believe your father will find hope again." The following weekend, Michael's mother came to visit. She barely looked at the baby. Instead, she sighed loudly. "Oh, Michael, what bad luck." Grace immediately looked up. "Mother, she's only a baby." The older woman folded her arms. "You've given birth to 4 girls." She shook her head. "Our family needs a grandson." Grace could no longer stay silent. "Mother, I didn't choose whether the baby would be a boy or a girl." "But you still failed," the older woman replied coldly. Michael remained silent. Not once did he defend his wife. That silence hurt Grace even more than the cruel words. Later that evening, Michael's friends stopped by after work. One of them laughed. "So, I heard your football team now has 4 daughters." Another added jokingly, "You'll need 4 weddings instead of 1." The men laughed. Michael forced a smile. Inside, embarrassment slowly turned into resentment. That night, Grace overheard Michael talking on the phone. "I can't accept this. I deserve a son." His friend replied, "You're still young. Many men marry a second wife. You'll get your son." Grace's heart sank. She quietly walked back into the bedroom before Michael noticed she had heard every word. Days turned into weeks. Hope grew into a beautiful, smiling baby. She laughed whenever her sister sang to her. Emma loved reading bedtime stories. Sophia made funny faces just to hear Hope giggle. Lily insisted on helping feed her every afternoon, even without her father's affection. Hope was surrounded by love. One Saturday afternoon, Grace asked Michael to watch the baby for just a few minutes while she prepared lunch. Hope began crying softly. Michael didn't pick her up. Instead, he turned the television volume higher. Emma rushed from her room. "Daddy, she's crying." "I know. Can you carry her?" "No." Emma gently lifted her baby sister into her own arms. She was only 10 years old. She rocked Hope carefully until the crying stopped. Standing in the kitchen doorway, Grace watched everything. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Her 10-year-old daughter was becoming more of a parent than her own father. That evening, Grace gathered enough courage to confront Michael. "When are you going to stop punishing an innocent child?" Michael looked at her without emotion. "I'm punishing no one. You haven't held her once." You won't even say her name. You don't celebrate her. You pretend she doesn't exist. Michael's face hardened. I wanted a son. Grace took a deep breath. And if God had blessed us with another son after this, he remained silent. Would that suddenly make Hope worthy of your love? Still no answer. Grace stepped closer. Look at your daughters. They worship you. They wait for you every evening. They pray for you before they sleep. And yet the one person failing this family, she paused. That isn't one of your daughters. It's their father. Michael stormed out of the house without another word. Grace sank onto the sofa, exhausted. She looked around the room. Emma was helping Sophia with homework. Little Lily was asleep with Hope resting peacefully on her chest. At that moment, Grace made a silent promise. No matter what happened, she would never allow any of her daughters to believe they were less valuable because they were girls. But she had no idea that Michael had already made a secret decision, one that would destroy what little remained of their marriage. After the argument, Michael became even colder. He left the house before sunrise and often returned long after everyone was asleep. Days would pass without him speaking more than a few words to Grace. Hope was now 6 months old. She had learned to crawl and smiled at everyone she met. Everyone except her father. Whenever Michael entered the living room, Hope would crawl toward him with excitement. She stretched out her tiny arms, hoping to be carried. Without looking at her, Michael would simply walk past. Grace watched it happen every single day. One afternoon, Emma quietly asked her mother, Mom, does Daddy hate Hope? Grace swallowed the lump in her throat. No, sweetheart. Your father is just lost. Emma wasn't convinced. If he loves us, why does he never smile at her? Grace had no answer. That evening, while cleaning the house, Grace noticed something strange. The expensive baby stroller they had received as a gift was gone. She searched the garage. Nothing. She checked the storage room. Still nothing. When Michael arrived home, she asked calmly, Michael, have you seen Hope's stroller? He didn't even look up. I sold it. Grace froze. You, what? I sold it. You sold our baby stroller? We don't need something that expensive. Grace stared at him in disbelief. You didn't even ask me. It belonged to our daughter. Michael shrugged. I needed the money. For what? He hesitated. Investment. Something about his voice felt dishonest. Later that night, Michael fell asleep on the couch. His phone vibrated repeatedly. Grace wasn't the type to check her husband's phone, but something inside her told her something was terribly wrong. The screen lit up. A message appeared. Victor, have you told Grace you're ready to meet the other woman's family? Grace's heart skipped a beat. Another message followed. Don't waste time. She'll give you the son you've always wanted. Grace could barely breathe. Her hands trembled. Another message appeared. I've already spoken to the elders. They'll arrange everything. Grace slowly put the phone back exactly where she had found it. She walked quietly into the bathroom, locked the door, and burst into tears. For over an hour, she cried in silence. Not because Michael wanted another wife, but because he believed 4 beautiful daughters were not enough. The next morning, she prepared breakfast as though nothing had happened. Michael sat at the table. Grace placed his food in front of him. Then she sat down across from him. I know. Michael looked up. Know what? I know why you sold Hope's stroller. His face changed. I saw the messages. The room became silent. Emma, Sophia, and Lily stopped eating. Even little Hope seemed unusually quiet. Michael sighed. I wasn't hiding it forever. Grace looked directly into his eyes. So it's true? You're planning to marry another woman? Yes. The girls looked at one another in confusion. Lily whispered, Mommy, what is Daddy talking about? Grace fought back tears. Michael continued, I deserve a son. I've waited long enough. Grace slowly stood. So after 12 years together, after 4 children, your solution is to replace us? I'm not replacing anyone. I just want an heir. Grace's voice became stronger. You already have heirs. You have 4 children who love you more than life itself. Michael slammed his hand on the table. They're girls. The entire house fell silent. Little Hope, frightened by his shouting, began crying. Emma quickly picked up her baby sister. Tears rolled down Emma's face. "Daddy, Hope didn't do anything wrong." Michael looked away. Grace realized something in that moment. The man she had married no longer saw his own children. He only saw what they weren't. She quietly walked into the bedroom. She pulled an old suitcase from under the bed. One by one, she folded clothes for herself and her daughters. Emma stood in the doorway. "Mom, are we going somewhere?" Grace nodded. "Yes." "Where?" She smiled sadly. "Somewhere you'll never have to feel unwanted." As she zipped the last suitcase closed, she whispered to herself, "If a father cannot see the treasure in his own daughters, then it's time to show my girls they never needed his approval to know their worth." Michael had no idea. By the next sunrise, his house would be empty. His. The sun had barely risen when Grace quietly closed the front door behind her. In one hand, she held Hope. In the other, she pulled an old suitcase. Emma carried another bag. Sophia held Lily's hand as they walked silently down the street. No one looked back. Grace's older brother, David, was waiting with his old pickup truck. The moment he saw his sister's swollen eyes, he understood. "He chose another woman?" he asked softly. Grace nodded. David sighed deeply. "Get in. You and the girls are coming with me." As the truck pulled away, Emma looked through the back window. "Daddy isn't coming?" Grace hugged her close. "No, sweetheart. Not today." The girls didn't understand why their father hadn't even come outside to stop them. But Grace did. He had already made his choice. David drove them to their late mother's small two-bedroom house on the edge of town. The roof leaked during heavy rain. The paint had peeled from the walls. The furniture was old, but it was peaceful. Grace looked around the tiny home and smiled. "It's not much, but it's ours." The girls ran from room to room laughing. "Mom, we have a mango tree. And look, there's space to play outside." For the first time in weeks, Grace smiled genuinely. Life became difficult almost immediately. Grace's savings disappeared within a few months. She searched everywhere for work. Finally, an elderly woman who owned a tailoring shop gave her a chance. "The pay isn't much," the woman admitted, "but if you're willing to work hard, I'll teach you everything." Grace bowed her head gratefully. "Thank you." During the day, she sewed school uniforms. At night, she repaired old clothes for neighbors. When everyone else slept, Grace remained awake under a small lamp, stitching dresses until her fingers ached. The girls noticed. One evening, Emma quietly entered the kitchen. Her mother was counting a few worn-out bills. "Mom." Grace quickly wiped away her tears. "Yes, sweetheart." Emma placed a small envelope on the table. "I've been tutoring my classmates after school." Grace looked inside. There were a few folded notes. "It's not much," Emma whispered, "but maybe it can buy Hope's milk." Grace could no longer hold back her tears. She hugged her daughter tightly. "You should be worrying about school." Emma smiled. "We're a team." The next day, Sophia began helping neighbors fix broken radios and small appliances. People were surprised by how talented she was. Soon, they started paying her small amounts. Little Lily picked flowers every afternoon and arranged them into tiny bouquets. She sold them outside the local church after Sunday service. Even 5-year-old Hope tried to help. She proudly carried tiny baskets while pretending she was working just like her sisters. The little house wasn't filled with wealth, but it overflowed with love. Meanwhile, Michael's life seemed perfect. Just 3 months after Grace left, he married a young woman named Vanessa. Their wedding was extravagant. Many of the same relatives who had mocked Grace attended the celebration. Michael's mother smiled proudly. "This time, we'll finally have a grandson." Michael believed it too. He renovated another room. Again, he painted it blue. Again, he bought footballs, toy cars, and tiny suits. Vanessa became pregnant within a year. Michael could hardly contain his excitement. He told everyone, "My son is finally coming." But 4 months into the pregnancy, Vanessa began experiencing severe pain. She was rushed to the hospital. Hours later, the doctor delivered heartbreaking news. "I'm very sorry, We couldn't save the baby. Michael sat in stunned silence. His mother cried quietly. Vanessa blamed herself for weeks. Michael comforted her. Don't worry, we'll try again. A year later, she became pregnant again. This time they were even more careful. She rested. She attended every appointment. Michael prayed every day. But tragedy struck once more. Another miscarriage. Vanessa fell into deep depression. Still, Michael refused to give up. One more time, he said. God will give us a son. A third pregnancy came. A third miscarriage followed. This time the doctor called them into his office. He spoke gently. I'm sorry. The repeated complications have caused permanent damage. Vanessa lowered her head. The doctor continued. It is extremely unlikely you'll ever be able to carry another pregnancy. The room fell silent. Michael couldn't believe what he had heard. The son he had sacrificed everything for might never exist. As they drove home that evening, neither of them spoke. For the first time in years, Michael thought about Grace. He thought about Emma, Sophia, Lily, and little Hope, the daughter he had never even held. He quickly pushed the memories away, but deep inside, something had begun to crack. 3 years passed. Grace's tiny house was still modest, but it had become a home filled with laughter, hope, and determination. Every evening, the family gathered around the dinner table. Before eating, they held hands and prayed. Thank you, Lord, Grace would say, for giving us enough for today. The girls never complained about what they lacked. Instead, they celebrated every small blessing. Hope, now 4 years old, had grown into a cheerful little girl with bright eyes and a contagious smile. She loved drawing pictures of her family. Every drawing looked almost the same. Her mother, her 3 sisters, and a tall man standing beside them. One afternoon, Grace noticed the drawing. Hope, she asked gently, who is this? Hope smiled. That's Daddy. Grace's heart ached. But Daddy doesn't live with us. Hope nodded. I know. But maybe one day he'll come back. Grace hugged her tightly. She silently prayed that if that day ever came, it wouldn't be too late. Meanwhile, Michael's life was beginning to crumble. His construction company, once one of the busiest in town, began losing major contracts. A trusted business partner disappeared with a large amount of company money. Several projects were canceled. Bills piled up. Employees started resigning because their salaries were delayed. The luxurious house that once impressed everyone slowly became a burden. Michael barely slept. Every night he sat in his office surrounded by unpaid invoices. Vanessa watched him with concern. We'll get through this, she said. But Michael wasn't listening. He had spent years chasing the future he imagined. Now even the present was slipping away. Then came another painful blow. His mother became seriously ill. Doctors diagnosed her with diabetes and kidney disease. Medical bills quickly drained what little savings they had left. The same relatives who had once encouraged Michael to abandon Grace suddenly became impossible to find. Whenever he called, someone always had an excuse. I'm traveling. I'll call you later. I'm going through my own problems. One evening, Michael sat alone in the hospital corridor. His phone remained silent. For the first time in years, he realized something. The people whose opinions had shaped his decisions were nowhere to be found. At the same time, Grace's daughters continued to shine. Emma graduated at the top of her class and earned a scholarship to study medicine. The entire neighborhood celebrated. Sophia won a national science competition after designing a simple water purification system for rural communities. Lily discovered a passion for public speaking. She became known at school for encouraging younger students who struggled with confidence and little hope. She had the kindest heart of them all. Every Saturday, she visited elderly neighbors with homemade bread that Grace baked. She would sit beside them, listen to their stories, and pray with them. People often said, "That little girl has a heart too big for someone her age." Grace smiled every time she heard it. She knew hope had become everything her father had failed to see. One rainy afternoon, Michael drove past the neighborhood where Grace now lived. His car slowed as he noticed 4 girls laughing together outside the small house. They were planting flowers along the pathway. Grace stood nearby, smiling as she watered the garden. For a brief moment, Michael considered stopping. His hand reached for the door handle, but shame held him back. "What would I even say?" he whispered. He drove away without anyone seeing him. That night, he couldn't sleep. The image of Hope laughing with her sister stayed in his mind. For the first time, he wondered, what kind of father had he become? But life wasn't finished teaching him. Just weeks later, a single phone call would change everything. It would leave Michael fighting for his own life. And the only people willing to stand beside him would be the very family he had abandoned. Michael remained in the hospital for several weeks. The stroke had left the right side of his body weak, and even speaking was difficult. Every day, the doctors encouraged him to exercise, but there were days he wanted to give up. One afternoon, the physiotherapist asked him to take just 3 steps. Michael tried. His legs trembled. He almost fell. "I can't do it," he whispered. Just then, a small voice spoke from behind him. "Yes, you can, Daddy." It was Hope. She walked over, gently taking his hand. "You taught me that when I was learning to walk." Michael looked at her in surprise. "I did?" Hope smiled. "Mom told me you carried me only once." Michael lowered his head. Grace quietly looked away. She knew that wasn't true. He had never carried Hope as a baby. Grace had invented the story years earlier because she never wanted Hope to grow up believing she had been unloved. Michael burst into tears. He realized Grace had spent years protecting his image, even after everything he had done. That day, with Hope holding one hand and the physiotherapist supporting the other, Michael managed to take his first 3 steps. Everyone in the room applauded. Months later, Michael was discharged from the hospital. He could walk again, although slowly, using a cane. His first request surprised everyone. "I want to go to Grace's house." Grace welcomed him politely. The girls stood quietly in the living room. Michael looked around the small home. It wasn't luxurious. The furniture was old. The walls needed repainting, but every corner was filled with warmth. Family photographs covered the walls. School certificates hung proudly in simple frames. There was laughter. There was peace. Everything he had once taken for granted. Michael slowly faced his daughters. His voice trembled. "I've spent years trying to find the right words. But there are none." He looked at Emma. "I wasn't there when you graduated primary school." He turned to Sophia. "I missed your science competitions." He looked at Lily. "I never heard your speeches." Finally, he knelt as much as his weak body would allow before Hope. "I never even gave you the love every child deserves." Hope immediately hugged him. "I forgive you, Daddy." Michael cried harder than he ever had in his life. A few weeks later, Michael called a family gathering. His relatives filled the room. Many were the same people who had once encouraged him to leave Grace. Michael stood slowly with the help of his cane. "I have something to say." The room became quiet. "For years, I blamed my wife because she gave birth to daughters. I believed a son was the only child worth celebrating." He paused. "I was wrong." He looked toward Grace. "I destroyed my own family because I listened to pride instead of love." He turned toward his daughters. "These 4 girls became the people who saved my life. When I lay helpless in the hospital, the relatives whose opinions I valued never came. But the daughters I rejected never left my side." Several people lowered their heads in shame. Michael continued, "If any father here believes his daughter is less valuable than a son, learn from my mistakes. You may already have the greatest blessing God could ever give you." The room fell completely silent. Even Michael's mother wiped tears from her eyes. She slowly walked over to Grace. "I'm sorry. I judged you unfairly." Grace gently nodded. "I forgave you a long time ago." The years passed. Emma fulfilled her dream and became a respected doctor. Sophia became an engineer, designing clean water systems for rural communities. Lily became a lawyer known for defending women and children who had no one else to speak for them. Hope, the little girl her father once refused to hold, grew into a successful entrepreneur. She built a thriving business that created jobs for dozens of women in her community. One evening, Hope invited the entire family to a special celebration. She handed Michael a small envelope. "Open it, Daddy." Inside was the deed to a beautiful new home. Michael looked at her in disbelief. "What is this?" Hope smiled through happy tears. "It's your home." You and Mom deserve to grow old in comfort. Michael couldn't speak. He simply embraced his daughter, holding her tightly. This time, he didn't let go. On Michael's 70th birthday, his family gathered around a large dining table. His daughter sat beside him. Their husbands and children filled the room with laughter. As everyone finished singing Happy Birthday, Michael slowly stood. He raised his glass. There was a time when I believed I needed a son to carry my name. He smiled at his daughters. But I was wrong. My daughters carried my life. They carried me when I was weak. They forgave me when I didn't deserve forgiveness. And they taught me that the greatest legacy a parent leaves behind isn't a family name. It's love. The room erupted in applause. Grace reached for his hand. He squeezed it gently. After everything they had been through, their family had finally found healing.